Welcome, students. Today we will talk about emotional intelligence. There are a lot of recent changes happening in organizations. Change is the only process which is permanent, isn't it? So, a lot of changes are being seen in organizations. In the past few decades, organizations have seen a fundamental shift in the management style. Roles have become much more customer oriented and knowledge based, with the need to work as a team. This has resulted in individuals having more overall autonomy at an individual level, even at fairly lower levels in the organizations. It is not just the top levels which have autonomy. And this has created organizational cultures which are less autocratic and only a few levels of management. So that autocratic culture has come down. The very nature of such organizations has allowed those with highly developed social skills to be as successful as those who excel academically. So skill is on one side, while academics is important, skill is become important as well now. The historical timeline of social or emotional shows that this is not a new concept, but one that over time has gained general agreement as a key element of workplace success. Emotions and interpersonal skills. Let's talk a little more about them. Studies confirm the importance of being present to our emotions at work. The result has a greater long-term impact on the bottom line than quality improvement programs or monetary incentives. Emotions are important. Being mindful of your emotions is equally important. In fact, there is now concrete evidence demonstrating that interpersonal skills are a greater predictor of success over technical and intellectual competencies. Interpersonal skills are very important now. Man skills, man management, and communication skills. All these interpersonal skills have become very, very important today. Emotional intelligence is the concept that we have to discuss now in this context. Emotional intelligence, what is it? It is summative of abilities, competencies, and skills that signify a collection of knowledge in order to cope with life effectively. Therefore, it is closely related to the personal and professional growth of the individuals who have to take decisions under stressful as well as difficult situations. Emotional intelligence is the ability to recognize and understand your emotions and your skill at using this awareness to manage yourself and your relationship with others. Let's talk about the definition of this term, emotional intelligence. It's developed as a psychological theory, and it was defined by Peter Salovey, John Mayer. What do they talk about? They say it is the ability to perceive emotions, to access and generate emotions, so as to assist your thought, to understand emotions and emotional knowledge, and to reflectively regulate emotions so as to promote emotional as well as intellectual growth. Emotional intelligence is important because many people are bogged down by emotions. They are pulled down by emotions. And in spite of all their intellectual superiority or so-called knowledge about many things, emotional intelligence, lack of emotional intelligence and dysregulation of emotions pulls them down in many, many contexts. The construct of emotional intelligence refers to the individual differences in the perception, processing, regulation, and utilization of emotional information. These differences in terms of all these perception, processing, regulation, utilization of emotional information, all these differences have shown to have a significant impact on important life outcomes. And what are those important life outcomes? They include mental and physical health, work performance, social relationships. With respect to all these, they seem to have important outcomes, important impact. Let's talk about some models of emotional intelligence. Three main emotional intelligence models are discussed. The first one is emotional intelligence model based on trait. The second is emotional intelligence models based on ability. And the third is emotional intelligence models, which are from mixed mode. That is, they're called mixed models. Let's first start with the trait emotional intelligence model. Trait emotional intelligence or trait emotional self efficacy is described as a constellation of behavior dispositions and self perceptions regarding a person's ability to recognize, process, and utilize emotional laden information. The trait emotional intelligence should be measured within the framework of an individual's personality because it's a trait, it's a part of his personality, his or her personality. This model maintains emotions as vital information sources that enable a person to make good use of the social environment. According to the model, an individual's ability to process emotional information varies from one person to another, and certain adaptive behaviors manifest themselves in this ability. The model, which we have been talking about, proposes four ability types. The ability model. One, perceiving of emotions. Two, ability of using of emotion. Third, understanding emotions. And fourth, initiating the emotions. So all these four abilities are equally important. After developing this model, it signaled the development of a measurement instrument that was named after its advocates, Meyer Salovey Caruso Emotional Intelligence Test. It's called MSCEIT. M for Meyer, S for Salovey, C for Caruso, and E for emotional, I for intelligence, and T for test. The acronym, the short form, which is based on various emotion-based problem-solving items. The ability of a person is measured on the four branches of emotional intelligence, which then generates a score for each branch and eventually the total score. So, the third perspective that we have to look into now, after trait model and ability model, is mixed model of emotional intelligence. So, when we talk about mixed models of emotional intelligence, we majorly talk about Goleman's emotional competencies model and Baron's emotional social intelligence model. Several studies have shown that emotional intelligence has considerable impact on the performance at work. It helps to steer the social intricacies of the workplace, to lead and motivate others, and to outshine in career. It also affects emotional intelligence, also affects health because it can manage the stress level. Your emotional intelligence helps you in management of stress, which if left uncontrolled, if the stress level is left uncontrolled, it can lead to serious health problems, isn't it? So it is well established in numerous psychological reports that major step to improving emotional intelligence is to learn how to relieve stress, which in turn will also improve mental health. By understanding one's emotions and how to control those emotions, person is able to express how to feel and understand also others' feelings. This permits more communication much more successfully and developing stronger relationships, both in terms of work as well as in the personal life, at workplace as well as in the personal life. Baron's model, Ewan Baron, has retained emotional intelligence in the framework of personality theory, specifically a model of well-being. Baron's model of emotional intelligence relates to the potential for performance and success instead of performance or success in itself. And this is considered a process-oriented model rather than outcome-oriented model. In his model, Baron summarizes having five components of emotional intelligence. First component of emotional intelligence is intrapersonal, second, interpersonal, third, adaptability, fourth, stress management, five, general need. Baron postulates that emotional intelligence develops over time and that it can be improved. That's a good part of it. It can be improved through training, programming, as well as therapy. Baron's model focuses on a range of emotional and social abilities. And what are those social abilities and emotional abilities? They include the ability to be aware of, understand, and express oneself. Second is the ability again to be aware of and understand and relate to others. And the third is the ability to deal with strong emotions, is the ability to adapt to change and solve problems of a social or personal nature. Please have a look at this chart which I am showing you. So emotional intelligence and its components are written on one side and its some sub-components are written on the other side. For the component of intrapersonal, the subcomponents are self-regard, emotional self-awareness, assertiveness, independence, self-actualization. For interpersonal component, the subcomponents are empathy, social responsibility, interpersonal relationship. For the adaptability component, the subcomponents are reality testing, flexibility, problem solving. And for stress management component, the subcomponents, stress tolerance, impulse control. And for the general mood component, the subcomponents are optimism, happiness. Mayer and Salovey's four-branch model of emotional intelligence may now be looked into a little more. Salovey and Mayer propose that emotional intelligence is composed of two areas. One is experiential area. What does it comprise of? It comprises of the ability to perceive, respond, and manipulate emotional information without necessarily understanding it. You just perceive, respond, and manipulate. Strategic is the other component. This is the ability to understand and manage emotions without necessarily perceiving feelings well or fully experiencing them. Understand and manage emotions without necessarily perceiving feelings well or fully experiencing them. Meyer, Salovey, and Caruso define emotional intelligence. In emotional intelligence, new ability or eclectic traits, Meyer, Salovey, and Caruso. This was published in American Psychologist in 2008. Emotional intelligence includes the ability to engage in sophisticated information processing about one's own and others' emotions and the ability to use this information as a guide to thinking and behavior. That is, individuals high in emotional intelligence pay attention to use, understand, and manage emotions. And these skills serve adaptive functions that potentially benefit themselves and others. In 2008, Meyer and Salovey, their proposal of the model of emotional intelligence was a 16-step developmental model. Was a 16-step developmental model of emotional intelligence from childhood to adulthood. Four branches were there. The ability to perceive emotions in oneself and others accurately, the ability to use these emotions to facilitate thinking, the ability to understand emotions, emotional language, and the signals conveyed by emotions, and the ability to manage emotions so as to sustain specific goals. So let's go to this revised model in 2016 where Meyer, Salovey, and Caruso together have proposed this in 2016, a revision. So we'll start with this first component. We talked about four components, isn't it? So first, let us talk about the first component, that is perceiving emotion. Here, you identify deceptive or dishonest emotional expressions, discriminate accurate versus inaccurate emotional expressions. You understand how emotions are displayed depending upon the context and culture. You express emotions accurately when desired, and you perceive emotional content in the environment, visual arts, as well as music. You perceive emotions in other people through their vocal cues, through their facial expressions, body language, and language, the medium of communication, the expression, and behavior. In all these contexts, you understand their emotions, you perceive their emotions. You identify emotions in one's own physical states, feelings, as well as thoughts. Then the second aspect is facilitating thought using emotion. Select problems based on how one's ongoing emotional state might facilitate cognition, can happen here. You leverage mood swings to generate different cognitive perspectives. You prioritize thinking by directing attention according to present feeling. You generate emotions as a means to relate to experiences of another person, and you generate emotions as an aid to judgment and memory. The third aspect is understanding emotions. You recognize cultural differences in the evaluation of emotions here. You understand how a person might feel in the future and under certain conditions, like which is called affective forecasting. You recognize likely transitions among emotions, such as from anger to satisfaction. You understand complex and mixed emotions. You differentiate between moods and emotions, and you appraise the situations that are likely to elicit emotions. You determine the antecedents, meanings, and consequences of emotions, and you label emotions and recognize reactions and relations. You understand, you recognize the relations between these emotions. Finally, managing emotions. You effectively manage others' emotions to achieve a desired outcome. Effectively manage your own emotions again to develop a desired outcome. Evaluate strategies to maintain, reduce, or intensify an emotional response. You monitor emotional reactions to determine their reasonableness. Engage with emotions if they are helpful. Disengage if they are not helpful. Stay open to pleasant and unpleasant feelings as needed and to the information that they convey. Please look at the chart where the four components have been connected to each other and presented. Perception, where emotions are identifiable in oneself and others can express emotional needs. Facilitation, where emotions are used to identify and prioritize important information. Understanding, where applying words to emotions and understanding when emotions are blended. And regulation, where you are working with emotions in oneself and others, whether positive or not positive. This is once again an overall chart. Emotional perception, you see the center. Emotional intelligence, constituents: emotional perception, emotional integration, emotional understanding, emotional management. So, and you move on. Emotions are perceived and expressed. Emotions are sensed and begin automatic influences on cognition. Emotions enter the cognitive system as noticed signals and as influences on cognition. Emotions and emotion related information is attended to. Emotional signals about relationships are understood along with their interactive and temporal implications. The implications of emotion from their feeling to their meaning are considered, and do thoughts promote emotional, intellectual, and personal growth. So, coming back to the mixed model of emotional intelligence of Daniel Goleman, he observes emotional intelligence as a mixed intelligence involving cognitive ability and personality aspects. He has promoted the notion of emotional intelligence and formulated it in terms of a theory of job and work performance. According to Goleman, five primary domains characterize emotional intelligence. The first one is self awareness. This is where you recognize your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, and emotions. It is knowing your own feelings, assessing your capabilities, and understanding weaknesses. Self regulation is the second component, which means it refers to managing your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, as well as emotions. It is the ability to control outbursts, disruptive impulses, and moods. It also encourages think before acting attitude. Third component is internal motivation. It focuses on meeting goals, taking initiatives, maintaining excellence, and optimism. It is a passion to work for internal reasons such as personal joy, curiosity, or mental satisfaction. Empathy is the ability to understand and respond to other people's feelings and emotions. It requires reading the feelings and understanding the needs of the others, which means empathy is one unique trait, quality, where you have to stand in the other person's shoes and understand that person from his or her framework and not from your subjective framework. It is not like you say, if I were you, I would do, I would be thinking like that. No, You have to be that person in order to understand. However, it is to understand their subjective feelings, but you don't get carried away by those subjective feelings. Social skill is the ability to negotiate the needs and feelings of others to that of yours. It is a proficiency in managing relationships and building networks, and an ability to find common ground. Once again, look at the self and social awareness and self management and relationship management. Please look at this chart which is being shown on the slide. Self awareness involves self confidence, where there is emotional self awareness and accurate self assessment. This leads to empathy, where social awareness is evoked. Organizational awareness happens when you have empathy, and you'll have a service orientation when you have empathy. From here, you move on to relationship management, where you see the influence, inspirational leadership, developing others, influence, building bonds, teamwork, and collaboration. But at the same time, relationship management is not just influenced by empathy. Please go back and see how self confidence influences self management. Self confidence helps in regulation. The recognition which self confidence gives helps in regulation in terms of self management, where we see self control, trustworthiness, conscientiousness, adaptability, achievement, drive to succeed initiative. And this in turn has an influence on relationship management once again, with the inspirational leadership, developing others, influencing others, building bonds, teamwork, and collaboration will be possible. The same is expressed in a more articulate form over here. When it comes to self, there is self-awareness, the ability to recognize and understand your moods, emotions, and drives, as well as the effect on others. Here, there is a recognition of who I am. Then, with self-management, there is a regulation which is involved. What I do is what we see over here: the ability to control or redirect disruptive impulses and moods, the propensity to suspend judgment and to think before acting. This is where we learn how to manage ourselves. And social awareness involves empathy, the ability to understand the emotional makeup of other people, skill in treating people according to their emotional reactions, and social skills, proficiency in managing relationships and building networks, an ability to find common ground and build rapport. Once again, a regulatory component. How to handle relationships is what we learn over here. So, applications of emotional intelligence, it's a valuable tool for administrators and managers. Since research on emotional intelligence began, results overwhelmingly show that people high on various combinations of emotional competencies outperform people who are weak in those areas. When emotional competencies are used, especially in leader selection, for example, performance and retention rates increase significantly. Research shows that most successful people, those who consistently outperform their peers, exhibit more of the skills and traits of emotional intelligence. High performing leaders tend to have higher emotional intelligence compared to their peers. For example, we have many examples of more successful non-technical CEO in a technical company compared to a technical CEO. The reason is that emotional intelligence becomes more decisive factor rather than IQ over here in many areas of leadership. Goldman believed that leaders with high emotional intelligence are the key in organizational success. Goldman also stated that as leaders, they must have the ability to know employees' feelings, to interfere during times of troubles, should be able to control their own feelings, should be able to realize the political and social interventions within organizations. And effective leadership is correlated with the ability of leaders to establish confidence among employees, respect and intelligently build relationship with the employees. Emotional intelligence and team building together have a great role to play. Emotional intelligence has a significant impact on a team member relationships and their effectiveness in reaching a team's goals. Understanding our own emotional intelligence, the strengths and weaknesses, as well as those of the other team members, provides a means for improving the interpersonal dynamics in a workplace. Very important. So, what to do? We are saying that it is a skill. Can training help? Yes, it can. How? Individual emotional intelligence fits with the emotional intelligence of other team members, managers, clients, and whatsoever. Work assignments can be made and accomplished much more effectively if necessary training is given and learning happens. And it helps in improving communication, to minimize the negative aspects of conflict, to present information most effectively, to design more effective problem solving groups, and to assist team members in maximizing their individual as well as collective strengths. Emotional intelligence also helps in conflict management, as I have just mentioned. It significantly influences how we go about solving interpersonal problems. Conflicts in organizations stem from the differences in the emotional intelligence. When people understand the basics of how they are different from each other and their strengths and weaknesses, they can take steps to reduce conflict and become more accepting. Emotional intelligence training can help to manage conflict by overcoming emotional intelligence differences in problem solving, in emotional dynamics, and in working together. So, with this, we have completed this unit 21. We have talked about the three modules which are integral parts of the unit number 21. Thank you.